Okay, so I'll just give that a second to kick in. You're probably hearing me now, but I'll wait till you can see me. Let me just switch across here. Wonderful. All right, that's all coming through. Excellent. Okay, so welcome to the Bendigo Tech School. So I'm just going to shut my door. Welcome to the Bendigo Tech School's live streaming sessions for this month. So this month is all about Intro 2s. So it's been one of the biggest requests from a lot of our teachers is introductions to certain pieces of software and hardware. So that's what we're going to be focusing on for the rest of this month. Now, I've got two cameras going, just because I feel like you really need to see me twice. But also so I can pick, this is my little more of my portable camera that I can kind of pick up and move around. So just in case I need to show anything else, of course I'm wearing my Latrobe shirt, you know, got to represent. So what we're going to do today is we are going to talk about Illustrator. Now I'm just going to check everything on my end to make sure we are coming through. So my audio seems to be coming through nice and clearly. But again, let me know if there are any issues on your end. So I think we have a lot of new people coming on today. Like I said yesterday, in yesterday's session, we are doing things a little bit differently now. We don't have the live stream live for people unless they register via Eventbrite. So if you're watching this right now, then you did that, so thank you. And if you didn't and you're watching this tomorrow, please register so you can watch the sessions live. They're not going to appear on our channel until the following day, just to kind of help us out a little bit with some stats. So let's get started. All right, so what we're going to be looking at today is Adobe Illustrator. So I'll bring it up really quickly now on my main screen. We can go from there, and I'll chat about what we use it for and what we can use it with today. So let me just bring it up. Alright, so I'm just going to let that load on my screen, and I'm going to switch it across to this second screen over here so you can see it. Now, I'm using Illustrator 2020. You may be using a different version depending on what version that your schools generally have. I think you're probably going to find that a lot of schools at the moment are running the older version, 2019. Let me just bring it up over here. Alright, where is Illustrator? I've got too many screens. I'm just going to Alt-Tab and make sure that's coming up. Okay. Oh, Illustrator does not want to work for me today. I'm just going to close that down and reopen it. Let's have to try that again. But yeah, so Illustrator 2019 is probably what you have in your classrooms. 2020 is not much different. Every year they release some slight changes to the setup, but I'm not going to worry about any of those today. I'm just trying to see why Illustrator is not kind of coming up on my main screen here at the moment. Sorry about that. What's going on with my computer? Okay, interesting. Sorry, I'm just going to see why Illustrator does not want to load. Alright, let me just try... I'm just going to try and load it directly. Sorry, I'm just going to see what's going on here. Sometimes it can... There we go, it can crack it a little bit because I'm running on multiple screens. So sometimes it can... Well, it's definitely not happening today. So what I might do is I'm going to... Okay, let's see what's going on. I might actually shut down one of my cameras and just see if that's pushing my computer. Don't send. Let me just try that again. Illustrator. Okay. Alright, I'm just going to shut off this one camera because I think it may be causing a bit of trouble. Alright, let's have a look here. Okay, so I don't want to reopen that one. And let's see if it's going to work for us. Alright, so I'm just going to shut this one off. Sorry, it seems to be cracking the SAD, so let's just see if I can minimize as many things as I can to see if that's going to fix the problem. Alright. So nothing like a little bit of live troubleshooting, I suppose. Yeah, it's definitely dead. Let me try that again. Alright, so my stream is still going through. Well, we'll actually start Illustrator eventually. Let's see how we go. Okay, still. Alright, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to unplug my external monitor now and see if that helps. So this is going to go blank for a little bit. Sorry about that. Until I can try and get this to work. Let's see if I can get Illustrator to kind of come up on the screen, and then we'll see how we go. I might have to do a whole restart here, which will not be good for a live stream. Alright. There we go. Okay, we're up and running now. So you're going to have a black screen there. I'm going to just plug my external monitor back in and hopefully we'll be okay. So obviously there was a few issues there with my external monitor. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to drag that across. There we go. I had to do some quick repairs on my laptop and it looks like it's still struggling a little bit. But we're back. We're back up and running. So give it a minute and you'll start to see... awesome. You'll start to see that come up there in a second. All right. So, awesome. And 3,000 runs 7th of May. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Mr. Roland. That is definitely true. I'm also thinking, Mr. Roland, that some of your staff, were they expecting to see this up live on our YouTube page, or did they know that to watch it live, they actually had to click that link in the Eventbrite booking, because these won't be publicly shown live until the following day. They'll be able to see a playback, but if they want to watch it live, they do need to click on that link, because I'm just looking at the amount of viewers I have at the moment, and it doesn't seem to equal the amount of registrations we had, but that's okay. I'm going to power through. All right, so we have Illustrator back up and running, and I'm going to get going. So a lot of you may have not used Illustrator before. Obviously, if you're looking at an introduction to, that's probably why you're here. You want to see how it works. So what we have here is the setup. So I'm just going to create a new document, and I'm going to explain why we use Illustrator, how it works, those kind of things as we go, and explain basically the whole purpose of it and vector design as well. So what we have here is when you start up Illustrator, you're given a bunch of presets. If I go into, say, mobile, you'll see a bunch of resolutions there and dimension sizes depending on what platform you're working with. We have our web, obviously, as well, and then print. So I'll probably focus on print today. We'll look at using print for this. Now I'm just going to go back and I'm going to turn off that second camera because I just disconnected my phone. I'm going to turn that one off. Yeah, we don't need that, just because it was making my computer's fan spin up just a tad loud. So there we go. Let's head back. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to choose an A4 and I'll explain what all this means in a minute. So we have our dimensions there for an A4 page. That's in points, but we'll flick it to millimeters because that probably makes more sense to us. So there's the dimensions of an A4 page. You also have bleed as well, but we're not going to worry about bleed just yet. Bleed's more for printing, but we're not going to worry about that because we're not actually going to be looking at printing anything just yet. Then we have our color mode. If I go down here, you have CMYK or RGB as your color formats. CMYK is probably the default when it comes to printing, so we'll leave it on that. And then we have basically our pixels per inch. Now, this is not a huge importance with vector design because it doesn't actually really worry about PPI or pixels per inch because it uses vectors, which I'll explain more in depth shortly. But what it's got there is for raster effects. So in other words, if we're designing something in Illustrator, let's say we're designing I don't know, a newsletter layout or a logo or something like that, and we actually do want to print it, raster it'll turn those vectors into a printable document. And by having it at 300 ppi or points per inch, that is the resolution that printout will be. And because I've got it on A4 page, it's at 300 ppi because that's the resolution you want for a printout. If I was working into the web, I'd actually probably have that down at 72. So what it means is the amount of information, the amount of pixels per inch of that image, the more you have, obviously, the more dense it is, the more clear it is, but also the higher that image is in terms of file size. So for printing, that can be important. But anyway, we don't need to worry about that much yet. So I'm going to hit create. And then I'm going to get a white page. All right, so there's our A4 page. And now we start creating. Now, there are two bits of software, I suppose. There is Adobe Illustrator and there is Adobe Photoshop. They're probably the main two that you're used to using or even understand. So Photoshop, I'm just going to switch across to make sure everything's okay. Cool, awesome. Thank you, Mr. Roland. So Photoshop is what you want to use when you are working with photos, essentially. Okay, it's in the name. So that piece of software is designed for editing photos, for touching up photos, for doing those kind of things, adding effects. It's really not designed for creating new content, creating images, logos, those kind of things. That's what Illustrator is for. Illustrator is for creating content. Now, I'm going to do a Photoshop session later in the week. So if you have more of an interest in Photoshop and editing photos that you've got, that's what that is for. Illustrator is really for creating content. So let's create some content. Now, remember, this is an intro, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on this here. I'm just going to show you how the software works and basically the idea behind it and the format. So what I'm going to do, easiest way to explain this is I'm going to create a rectangle. Okay. And there it is there. And I just held down Shift so I could conform that rectangle, which means if I don't hold down Shift, I can make it any size I like. If I hold Shift down, it kind of conforms it into that shape. Okay, so I'm going to stick with that one there. Now, just for the sake of our live stream, I'm going to increase the stroke on this, and I'll explain that in a minute, just to something easier to see. All right. So now we have a square. We have a square that has what's called a stroke, which is this black line out here, and a fill color, and that fill is white at the moment. If I want to, I can make that like I can make that red. Okay, so there is our square shape there. Or I'll just make it see-through by clicking that one there. So now there is no fill shape in there. Now, if this was a simple square and we want to print this, we'd have a nice simple square. Now, if this was Photoshop, obviously, if I was going to enlarge or decrease this square, what you would find is it would start to lose quality because you're playing around with the original pixels. So if I made it bigger, the pixels will start to distort or get blocky. If I made it smaller, they'd start to blur and back and forth. But you'll notice that in Illustrator, we don't have that problem. We actually don't even have pixels. So what Illustrator does is it uses these things called vectors, or in this case, an easier way to explain it is we have anchor points here, all right, and then we have a line here, which is the path. And to explain that, we have a square here is made up of 4 anchor points, okay, and then there is a path that connects those anchor points together, all right. Now each anchor is in a certain point in space, so we can see we've got these x and y coordinates. So that's the x and y coordinates on our actual page, and that's where that one lies. So if I move that, you can see those coordinates are changing. And that path, that blue line now, is getting redrawn on the fly. So whenever I move that point, the path is getting redrawn to create a new shape. So if I let that go, we now have a new shape. All right, if I move that over here, we now have a new shape. So what this is showing you is, unlike pixels with vectors, you don't have to worry about the size because it's infinitely scalable, because it's not using pixels to create the information, it's using these anchor points, and it's then calculating the line between those anchor points. So you could have this shape as small as you wanted to, and then enlarge it to something as big as you wanted to, and it would always stay the same quality. So the reason why we use this a lot in the tech school, if we start talking about manufacturing, we'll talk about, say, subtractive manufacturing, and that's things like laser cutting, CNC machining, those kind of things, is they use vectors to create their cuts. They use a vector to create the path that's going to get cut out of a material, and so they follow those anchor points and those paths. So it means that I could cut this little shape out on, say, a laser cutter, and it might be, a couple of centimeters, and then I could transfer this same file to the CNC machine, and I could cut it out 10 times the size, but still keep my original file. All right, so that's the benefit of doing things in vectors. The other benefit, of course, is that the file size is very small. There's no pixels per inch, so there's no kind of information here other than really maths. And so this file size is probably a couple of kilobytes, and I can have some very detailed images. So where would you see vectors? I'll bring up my phone, and I'll just go to my main page. All right, and I'm just going to switch my camera across to my big head. There we go. So if you look at something like my phone here, I'll see if I can pick it up. This is why I had my external camera, but I didn't want my computer to die. So every single icon on that phone there is a vector, okay? Some simple little ones, like I guess the YouTube there. YouTube icon is just a simple kind of rounded rectangle with a plus. Then looking into some more complex ones with a little bit of shading as well. So they're all vectors, all right? Now the reason why we have those on a phone is, again, because of that scalability. I can design that icon once, and then I can use it as many times as I want on this phone, and it will constantly scale to suit. So you can see I've got the size of, say, one of these icons here, but if I put them in a folder, like over this afternoon, I put them in a folder there, it's still the same icon, and it's still the same file. It's just scaled down. So the software is saying, if this icon is in this state, scale it down. So it's using the one file to be able to show, say, 100 different versions of that. So if we weren't using vectors, if we were using, say, Photoshop images, all right, I would have to actually save and render out a huge amount of images at all different scales and different sizes and have them on my phone. So that's taking up a lot of space, it's taking up a lot of time. So with this way, I have one image and I can scale it as much as I want. If this icon was on my laptop, it would be bigger again. If it was on my TV, bigger again, but all using the same file. Okay, so that's why we use vectors. They're super, super handy to scale, to change, to edit, really. So let me switch back to my screen. Okay. So, whoops, I'm going to go back to where I took my external monitor. There we go, I switched to a bunch of screens in. So, that's how this works. So we basically have one point, okay, and we have a path that follows that. Now, I can also show you a more complex version of this. I'm just going to go back into chat and make sure everything is okay. Yep, we're all doing okay. So, let's switch back across here. So, let me delete this one. All right, I'm just going to go into my selection and delete. And I'm just going to change this to a circle. All right, and I'll show you my circle, my ellipse. So exact same principle, you can see here. I've got two selections. I'm going to do direct selection, which allows me to select the individual elements. So you can see with the circle here, I still have an anchor point, and I still have a path, but now what I have are these things called handles. And these handles control, I guess, the fall off of that path. So with that handle, I can move that path and I can change that as well, and it kind of redraws that. And of course, these handles themselves have X and Y coordinates too, but they also have this kind of like this depth that I can kind of pull it in and I can swing it in and out. And so that's controlling the curve of our line there. All right. So again, still using a anchor point, but now controlling it with a handle. So that's pretty simple, right? And of course, I can use the plus key, and I can add as many anchor points as I want, and I can kind of move them around separately. All right, so I might just go plus, add another one there, add another one there. All right, press the A, which is the direct selection. I can kind of move those around and start to make a bit of a shape. It kind of looks like Australia. Look at that. Or how I used to draw Australia when I was a little kid. So you can start to move around those things. I can use the minus key, and I can take away anchor points. Okay, so it's pretty simple. I can also use what's called the pen tool, and I can draw these manually. So I'm going to go to the pen tool, and I'm going to draw, let me see if I can draw a circle, right? I'm going to go, oops, my computer's not liking this. Let's see, go back there. Let's go back to my pen tool. Let's try that again. All right, 1, 2, 3. So I can draw a shape. You can see it's got a little circle there because I'm going to close it and make a shape. Then I'm going to hold Shift-C to actually convert that to give it some handles. All right, and I can take that pretty bad shape and make it, well, let's make it even worse. But I can kind of draw a shape as well by using the pen tool. So it's pretty simple that way as well. All right, and that's kind of how vectors work. So let's delete these two. And let's look at making for today for our intro too. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes to make a logo, right? Let's just make a logo for, maybe it's your letterhead on your school. I'm just going to show you how to do that all in vector format. And then you can see how easily we can kind of scale that up and scale that down, because a logo is a perfect example of why you want to use Illustrator. So thinking of a school, you know, you're going to have your logo on your letterhead, you're going to have it on your website, you're going to have it potentially on school uniforms, on their jerseys, you might have it on bags. It's going to be used everywhere. Now, you don't want to be constantly redesigning that logo. You don't want to have someone call you up and go, oh, I need the logo for the, I don't know, we want to have a giant billboard down Bendigo Way celebrating Mr. Rowland's amazing accomplishments as a teacher. We need that logo. We need that logo to be super huge. You don't want to have to then kind of redesign that in Photoshop and send it to somebody. You just want to go, here's our original vector, scale it up to whatever size you want, and printers can do that. So let's do that. Let's make a logo for a school. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain basically what I'm doing as I go. So that'll help us kind of understand how this is going to work. So first up, I'm going to make a circle. Okay, so I'll get my circle because I'm just going to do a nice, simple, rounded logo. So I said that your shape has a stroke, which is this black outline here, and a fill color. Now, you can change that over here. So you can see I can change my stroke size to whatever mil I want. And I can change the fill color as well. So I'm going to change that fill color. I'm going to make it blue. There we go. And a CMYK blue as well. And because it's a CMYK blue, it means if I choose this blue, and I'll show you what I mean. I'll double click that blue. You'll see we have certain percentage values for CMYK. So we have 100% C and 100% M. And what it'll happen is when I go to the printers, they'll use this exact same setting as well. So they'll use these two color settings, which means what I see on my screen technically is what my printout should look like. Okay, because I'm using these exact colors. I'm not kind of guessing it. So CMYK is pretty important there. In fact, most of your schools will have certain style guides and they'll have CMYK colors for their logo. So anyway, I'm going to do that. I'm then going to increase the thickness of that stroke to 10 mil. There we go. I've got this lovely round body here. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use Pathfinder. So I'll introduce another tool now. So I'm going to create another circle. There we go. And you'll see when you create another shape, it's kind of taken on by default the properties of the last shape. So I'm going to put this here. I'm going to hold Shift to make it a little bit bigger. All right, I'm going to try and get it in the center. Now, I can kind of guess and get it in the center. All right, or what I can do is I can select both items here, and you'll see the side panel over here in Properties. It changes depending on what you're doing. If I select one item, I can see I can transform the scale, the size, I can change the radius, and I can rotate it. I can change the colors and the stroke, and I can offset it. Or if I select two, that'll change, and now you can see the Align panel come up, because the Align panel only works when you have two items to align or more. So I'm going to select that one, and that one. There we go. So now it's perfectly in the center. Now you also notice when I selected two of those shapes, I had a thing called Pathfinder come up. Now Pathfinder is really important. Pathfinder is a way to use shapes to create other shapes. So here's my logo, but I don't want this internal circle in there. I want it to be hollow. I want it to be see-through. All right. So what I can do is, now that that's in the center, if I select both of those, you can see I have a few options. I'm going to do that one. And now it's used my circle that was in the center to kind of like punch through that first circle. And now I have a button, okay? And that is it's a new shape, all right? That has now become its own shape. I don't have those two items anymore because I use one to punch a hole out of the other one, and now I have that there. Excellent. So now, oops, I'm just going to get out of that. So now I have my circle. I can still go back in and change things. That's a good thing with vector format. Because it's all digital, I can just, if I wanted to make it red, I can, now it's red. Or if I wanted to do a nice gradient, I can do that as well. I can go in here, and I can change my gradient slider. I'll change that color. I wanted to have, let's go into my strokes here. Let's put a red there. And for this one here, I might make that blue. And for this one here, I might make that red again. Okay, so now I have this nice kind of gradient. I can change that. I can slide it across. Again, these are things that if you were doing in Photoshop would take you a heck of a long time to do because it's not designed for that kind of work. There we go. I kind of like my gradient fall off there. And of course, there's a whole bunch of presets you can pick from, or you can make your own. So there we go. So that's my fill color there. Now I want to have some text. I'm going to put some text around this. Now for text, you simply use your text tool, and you can type away. School name. What a great school. And I can increase the size of that, just like a normal text editor can. There we go. And again, you'll see this panel changes depending on what we're doing. So now I've got text options here. So I can choose whatever text I want. I might choose, let's go modern Vic cursive. No, let's do my favorite font in the world, which is Archer. Good old Archer Pro. Love that font. All right, and I will make that bold. So now I've got my school name there. Now, by default, this is also a vector. When you create your text in Illustrator, it creates a vector. So we'll leave it like that for now. What I'm going to do is I did want to have a rounded bit of text around here. So I'm going to get my text tool and show you another little trick. So whenever you see a tool option up here, okay, if it has a little arrow in the bottom corner, like that one there, so there's a little arrow, that means there's more options under there. So if I hold that down, I can see I have more options. So I'm going to do type on path, all right? Before I do that, I'm going to create a new circle. All right, I'm going to create another circle about there. I'm just going to make it hollow so I can see through it. And I'm just going to give it a stroke. There we go. All right, and so now I have that. I'm going to center that. There we go. Oh, you can see this one centered. So I'm going to select all those and I'll center align it. All right, so now I've just got this other line here. Now the reason why I've done that is because I'm going to get my text and I changed it to type on path. And so now I'm going to select that path. There we go. And you can see the text is automatically following around that path. Again, something that's really hard to do in Photoshop. It's super quick to do here. So now I'm going to go school name 2020. Don't schools normally have a logo of some kind of, you know, Regus, Formus, Procapus? I don't know. It has some slogan. So we'll just do slogan. Slogan. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, now I'm kind of happy with that text and where it's placed. Obviously, I'm going to increase the size of it. It's a bit tiny there. So I might make it 25 point there. You can see if I go back in here, I can actually move that starting point if I want to. So I can kind of move this to a different point, and that's my end point. I can move my start point, so I can kind of move that around. So I'm going to move my end point to about there. And I might move my start point to there. Okay, so you can start to get that text to work. Now again, things that take a long time to do in Photoshop, you can do here pretty quickly. And you'll also notice that that path I chose has now disappeared. It's still there, okay, as a outline, as a path, but it's not a shape that you can see. So there we go. So we're starting to get our logo here. This is looking pretty cool. Okay, well, it's not, but anyway, for the sake of this, it's there. Now, one thing to remember with this here is that everything is editable after the fact. So I can go back in, I can change that path, I can change that text, I can do whatever I want to it. All right. So now let's create a little logo. Let's create a little character. All right. Let me just do. What could I do? I'm looking around my office for some inspiration. All right, cool. Let's do this. I'm going to grab one of these little wood puzzle thingies that I made for Raph. All right, so I've just grabbed that. Cool, I'll bring up my camera. Now, I did this in the last session, but I'm sure you won't mind doing it again. So I'm going to recreate this little shape here. This is a little bit of wood that we've cut out with the laser cutter. So I'm going to make that shape. I'm going to make it, oops, there we go, our school logo with a school of pandas. So let's make that. We'll head back to my external monitor. Just going to check chat to make sure everything is okay. All going good. All right, so let's head back here. So let's start to make this little panda guy. It's not hard to do. So you can see that it is a bunch of, sorry, my light up there is probably not helping the camera. You can see it's really just a bunch of shapes, isn't it? A bunch of geometric shapes. So let's make that, and that'll be the last part we do for our school logo. All right, so I'm going to do that. What I'm going to do over here, so now I've been working obviously on this, what's called an artboard, this A4 page here. I want to stay working in here. I don't want to do a new document, but I don't want to clog up this page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a new artboard. Now, if you're finding that you don't have all these things I'm talking about on your layout here, okay, if you go into Window and Workspace, you can see what workspace I'm using. So Illustrator has a bunch of different workspaces depending on what, I guess, what you're working in. So I'm working in, at the moment, I'm working more in, I guess, in print, okay? And so if you click any of these options, what it'll do, I'll do printing for now. What it'll do is you can see it changes the layout. It's not doing anything. It's not taking options away or giving you more options. It's just showing the appropriate options. So in print, you can see your color swatches. They're super important, obviously, in print. You can see a CMYK overview. You can see your stroke. You can see your gradient. So it's focusing more on look and color here because that's what's more important in print. If I switch across to my workspace and I go to, say, web, there we go. That's changed again to tools that I'll be looking at on web. So we now have interactivity, we have hyperlinks, we have text, because things are working on the web. So depending on what you're working in, you might want to change your workspace. Or what I normally do is I just normally have it on Essentials Classic, which is like the default, and I stick on that. So if you ever lose anything, just go up to your workspace and then just go reset. And then it'll reset it back to the default for that. So again, I stick on Essentials Classic. So I was talking about an artboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to go into my window and go to artboards because that's not showing that. There we go. I'm going to put a new artboard in. There we go. So I'm going to just zoom out a bit. So I'm just going to Control minus here. Sorry, I'm still working on a Mac. So there we go, Control minus. So now I've got two artboards. So I've got like two A4 pages. All right. So think of this like you're starting to collect, I guess, pages in this binder. And this way I can work on my logo over here without affecting this. And it's in a separate area, but still the same document. So when I save this document, everything is there. So you would work on multiple artboards. So you might have your logo here. You could have different working designs down here, different templates. So it helps you keep everything together as opposed to having, 28 different Illustrator files. You can have one Illustrator file and multiple artboards on that for different parts of that project. So let's make ourselves a wee little panda. So I'm just going to create that circle. All right. Again, you can see by default it's picked up the design choices from last time. That's okay. I'm going to just zoom in a bit. All right, so first up, it had a nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the ellipse tool to make that nose. There we go. I'm going to have that direct selection tool. I'm just going to change that a little bit. And I'm going to move that out. And move that out. There we go. We now have a nose. All right, and I'm just going to leave that over there for now. If I select both of them, I can align them so they're centered. Okay, so we know that's in the center. All right. Let's look at the eye. So the eye was just pretty much an angled ellipse. So I'll do that as well. There we go there. I'm going to go to the bottom corner over here and just rotate it a touch. Hit V. And I'm going to move that over there. All right, now the eye was half an ellipse, wasn't it? So all we need to do for that is draw our ellipse, do our direct selection tool, delete a point, delete an anchor there, and there we go. We now have that shape. All right, and I'm going to place that over there. Okay, and let's have a look at the mouth. All right, so if you look at the mouth, it's basically two of these. I'm going to Control C and Control V that, and then I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. Control C and Control V that, and I've got two shapes now. There we go. I'm just going to zoom in on those shapes, and I'm going to intersect them. So now they're kind of intersected together. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to select those two. I'm going to merge them together. There we go. All right, and you can see what it's done is it's tried to make that path across there because it wants to make the path like a fill. It wants to close the path together. So another way is I'm going to hit A, select those two endpoints, and then do Control G. And what that has done is that's joined those 2 points. No, it hasn't, but it should have. Let me do that again. Let's do Control J. There we go. That's better. Sorry, Control J. And so it's joined. See how it's joined those 2 points together now? Okay, so that's one object. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my pen tool and I'm going to draw line there. And same deal, I'm going to hit the select all those points, Control J. There we go. And now I've joined all those points together. So now this is, still didn't work. Let's do that again. All right, go in, select all of those. Come on. And then Control J. There we go. Okay, so now I have one path there. Wonderful. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just group these together. Control G. All right, so now I have that little smiley face, and I'm going to move that over there. Now, obviously that one's a bit big, so I'm going to select that anchor point, scale it down, V to select this, and move that up there. All right, so we're starting to get that kind of face there. Now, the last thing we had was the ears. So I'm going to create my circle there. And then I'm going to Control C and Control V. So now I have that inner circle. And I'm going to change this. Now I'm going to do a different one. I'm going to hold Shift and the Alt key and then scale. And so now it's made a smaller circle of that. It's scaled that circle a little bit smaller. But I'm going to show you another trick. So if you want to make any shape smaller or larger based upon that original shape, if you use the Offset Path tool, which appears when you select a shape. So if I go to Offset Path, I get a new option here. I'm going to set that to 4 mil and round. So now I can increase or decrease that shape. So I'm going to go say -4. Oops. -4. My numpad must be off. Let's do it this way. -4. And it's going to make a smaller version of that shape. Okay, so that's your offset tool. So now I have that ear there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to select those two and use my punch command like I did before. So now this is now one solid shape. So you can see there, it's a solid shape in there. And now I'm going to delete that anchor point and delete that anchor point. So now I have the ear. And then finally, I'm going to select these two paths and Control J and Control J. There you go. So now I've joined that together as a solid shape, which is important when you want to fill this in. So we'll kind of rotate that down there and I'll put this here. Okay, that's good enough. We'll fix up the placement in a second. All right, in fact, let's make it bigger. It's a bit small. I'm just going to scale that up a bit and move it there. All right, one ear. So now what I'm going to do is, obviously I need it to be on the other side as well, but I'm just going to grab all those, Control C. I'm going to do Edit, Paste and Place. That's in the same spot. I'm just going to move these across over here. And then I'm going to right click and transform and reflect 90 degrees for an image of it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select those two shapes. I'm just going to select all of these. I'm going to get rid of that one. And I'm going to group this together, Control G. So now what I can do is by selecting everything, and actually, no, oops, sorry, the eyes as well. I need to kind of, oops. I want to ungroup that. I didn't mean to do that. So get rid of the eyes. I don't want the eyes in this group. That's better. So you can see what's selected because it's got that blue line. Now I'm going to group those together, so that's one object. And then I'm going to group those together, and that's one object. The reason why I did that is because now I can select everything and very easily align it. You may not have seen much of a change there. Let me show you a bit more of it. I'll move everything all over the shop, right? So if I select all of those elements, I can easily align them. Bring that down there. Bring that down there. Cool. All right, we're nearly there. What an amazing thing that I've created. All right, let's give it a bit of color. All right, we'll move that down. There we go. You can use the arrow keys to move stuff as well. All right, let's make this a polar bear, panda bear. All right, so I'm going to make that white. So you can see the fill color here is white, okay? But this layer here, so we'll talk about layers, this element here is on top of that one. So you can see it's actually on top of it, so we can see the line. And that's because the layers are here. So if I scroll down, you can see everything that we create has a separate layer, all right? And we can kind of move those layers around. So think of them like having clear sheets of maybe cellophane paper. And whenever you draw something, if you place it on top, you're going to see what's below it. And so I don't want these ears to be seen. I don't want them to see this kind of path here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that layer and I'm just going to drag it down under the face. There we go. So that shape is still there. You can see when I kind of roll over it, you highlight it, but that color, that shape there is in front of it. So let's do that. Let's make the nose brown. All right. And let's make, I don't know, I'm going to ungroup that now. Or if I double click something, you can isolate it. So I'm going to double click it. And even though it's in the group, I'm just going to work on that. And I'm going to make that a light brown. All right. And you can see here, we've got that white there. That's because that has a fill color. Even though we only want the outline. So I'm just going to get rid of that fill color. There we go. So there is our amazing little logo. What a brilliant thing. So I'm going to move that out. And now I'm kind of happy with that. All right. So what I can do is I can group that together. I might leave it over here. All right. I'm going to just go Control C, Control V, make a copy of it and bring it over to my logo here, my school logo. And I'm going to hold Shift and scale it down. And again, you can see how perfect that is when you scale something down here. The quality is perfect because it's a vector. So now I have my logo there. Now you can see, obviously, I didn't have a shape behind that ear. So that's why we have that bit of see-through there as well. So I can go back and fix it up if I want, but for now, we'll leave it like that. Okay, so we're nearly done with our amazing school logo. All right, so we're kind of happy to go here. It kind of looks more like a disc than anything. I don't really like that stroke. It's too big now. I'm going to bring that down. There we go. And I might just make my little bear a little bit bigger. I'm going to put him there. Okay, so my school logo is nearly completed. What we're going to do now is we will get ready to export and print this, and then we're done. And then what I would want you to do for the remainder of this session is have a go and make your own little amazing school logo like this. So there are a whole bunch of other tools here as well. I'll only go over them briefly because we're just introducing you to this piece of software. We're not going to go in depth in it. We have been doing that for the past few weeks, and we'll be finishing that off tomorrow. So we are doing a session tomorrow on Illustrator as well, but we're going to be doing laser cutting from my garage, if that all works out. So we have a bunch of tools down here. Like I said, each time you press a tool, you have more options that are under there as well. If it has that little arrow, obviously your pen tools, we talked about that, how you can create your own shape. Your text tools, you have quite a lot of options there as well. Your shape tools are all there. You do have a pen and a paintbrush, so you can draw here. And what it'll do is it'll turn your scribble into a vector line. So you can see here, it's created some points for you. You probably wouldn't use a pen tool much because it's quite hard to do that with the mouse. You would use it if you had, say, a Wacom tablet connected. You could probably draw with that. In fact, I do that quite a lot. So you can draw vector paths if you want to. I find, though, using the pen tool to kind of design my shapes a bit easier. But anyway, we have an eraser, so we can just go and get rid of certain sections, all right? And it will try and redraw those. But these vectors haven't made... I haven't outlined yet, so that's not going to do anything. Then we have a few other options in terms of warping too. So you can kind of create a mesh as well, which you can use to warp and distort your shapes. So that's the gist of it. We talked about, obviously, fill and stroke there. And then we talked over here about how whenever you select an item with your general select tool, depending on what you want to do and what you've selected, by selecting multiple, different options will appear. And then, of course, we talked about Pathfinder. So that's a very simple introduction. So let's export this. So if I go into File, Save, what will happen is I can save the Illustrator version of this, okay, which is just going to be a very teeny tiny file. The Illustrator files will be super small because, again, they're all vectors there. I could print it or I could export it. So if I go into Export As, you get a few options on how you want to export this image. So it could be a JPEG if you wanted to. It could be a BMP. It could be an AutoCAD file if you want to then send it somewhere to a cutter. SVG is a digital file. You can send it to Photoshop. So you can export it in a whole bunch of different ways. Okay, so exporting is really once you're into that final product. So if you were exporting this for print, what you would probably end up doing is basically sending the Illustrator file these days, because printers and print companies, they don't need to have JPEGs anymore. They've got Illustrator. They can use this. So if I was sending this to print, let's say I'm happy with it. I wanted to get it printed on A4 posters. All right. What I would do, just one step, is I would get my text there. And because I've used a font on my computer called Archer, you might not have that font. If I sent this Illustrator file to a printer, he would open it, and if he didn't have that font, it would be missing, and it would not be able to render this font correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click that and do Create Outlines. And what that has done is that's turned that font into an actual vector format. So if I go in there, you can see each individual anchor point. And so now, when they open up that file, it will be exactly that. But they won't be able to edit that text anymore because we kind of like stamped it. But anyway, that's good for print. So File, Export, and we can do Export As, like I said. Choose an export option, okay? Or we can go File, Export, Export for Screens. And what this will do is this will give you options to... Oh, it's on the wrong side. Sorry, I'll bring it over here. It's on my wrong screen. There we go. So this will give you a bunch of options to export it for certain screens. So you can see here, this is where if you needed multiple JPEG, say, versions of one file. So this is kind of now more going into web. So with a web page, they don't generally use vector formats, you know, so they actually still use JPEGs. So you might have to do a whole scaling of different JPEGs, one for the home page, one for the icons, one for those kind of things as well. And so that's what this is for here when you do export for screen. It allows you to choose your image format. PNG is probably the most accepted these days. You can add a suffix to the end of the file name, and then you can add a bunch of scales. So I might say 1, 2, 3, 4, or I could say web, newsletter, those kind of things. And then if I hit OK, what it'll do is it'll automatically export that one image to all those different scaled options, which is really handy. So I can have, 20 different ideas, 20 different, formats I want it to export to, and in one click it automatically scales that one image to fit all those formats. puts those suffixes at the end so I know exactly which ones they are. They're in a folder ready to go. So that's super handy. So that's exporting for screens. Get rid of that. And then finally, my last export down here was save for web, which is kind of an older format. It allows you to start to tweak it a little bit. You can change scale and size. You can change if it's a GIF or a GIF, depending on what you want to say. You can change the amount of colors there. If I go into, say, my JPEG high, what I can do here is I can scroll between, so you can see that's 49 kilobytes. I can go down and say, make it nearly twice that size. I don't know if you can see a difference. I'll zoom in here. All right, and so you can start to change that for export to web. Now, as soon as you start exporting this as a JPEG, you're going to start to see those little blocks appear when you start to zoom in. Because remember, so now I've zoomed into, does it tell me my 400%? So if I go back to 100%, that's what it'll look like normally. Okay, but because we made it a JPEG now, if I export to say 800%, you're going to start to see that blockiness because those pixels are starting to enlarge. So that's because we're converting it into a JPEG. Our original Illustrator file is still there. All right, and that's about it. That is your introduction to Illustrator. So like I said, it's super simple. It really is designed for creating new images, all right? Now, I say it's super simple, but obviously I've been using it for forever. But one thing that I've found with students at the tech school in particular is they've never used Illustrator before. Let's say year 7s, they'll come to do a program and they'll never use Illustrator. Let's say I wanted to make something like this. It would probably take them, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours maybe to make this because I've never used Illustrator before. But if I then ask them to stop and make it again, they'll be able to make this in about 20 minutes. So that's the good thing with Illustrator. It's kind of like if you're using it for the first time, it's more, I guess, hunting and pecking and figuring out what does what and where is the button to do that thing. But once you've figured that out and you know all that kind of stuff, it's super simple to actually start creating. I found it to be a really kind of intuitive program and really quick to pick up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to end the stream on this one because again, just an intro too. I want you to have a go at using this. So as Mr. Roland was saying there, if you're at a DET school, you'll need access to Illustrator. You can download that. Or, you know, lots of schools that we work with in Bendigo have versions of it. You might just have to ask your IT guy. Or if you're watching this for the first time, you don't have any idea who I am and what we're talking about, you can get a trial of Illustrator as well. You can download a free trial to kind of have a go and see how it works. I believe it's 30 days. So plenty of options. So have a go at Illustrator, have a play, and let me know what you can come up with. So I'll just check chat and make sure we're all okay if there's any pressing questions on there as well. Cool. All right, so I think we are kind of all good to go. So no questions yet, but if you have any, please let me know. Feel free to shoot an email to the tech school and I will jump on. This video, once we're done with this session, I'm just going to make it live straight away. So if you did miss it and you want to come see it now, you may be a little bit late, it'll be live. We were going to leave it for a week before we put them up live, but we thought we'll put them up the next day. But it's still an encouragement to jump on board and to watch our live sessions because I think it'll be more helpful because you can ask some questions. Now, speaking of, I will do a quick plug. I like to do these at the end of each session. So sorry if you're stuck on the ends of all my sessions and you keep seeing these. So how you find, let's move it across here. How you find our sessions, okay? So they will be on our YouTube channel after they are live. But if you want to see them, live, which is, it's more important to get to chat with me, then if you just jump to the Bendigo Tech School website, you'll see our list here. And all you need to do is give it a click and you can register. Registration is completely free. It really is just there for us to kind of just, tailor our content for our audience, which is make a few things better for you. So feel free to do that. So coming up tomorrow is the final, is it tomorrow? Yeah. The final class of our Illustrator Masterclass, which has been going on for the past month. And that will be looking at actually cutting stuff out on a laser cutter from Illustrator. Like I said, I'll be running that from my garage. So it's pretty cold and dark right now in Macedon. It's like 1 degree. So that's going to be fun. We'll see how that goes. I look forward to that. That'll be tomorrow. So that's going to be a recap of these 3 previous classes. But if you've never done any of the previous, feel free to jump in, especially if you've got an interest in laser cutting and see how that works. Then after that, we have an intro to Premiere on the 1st, which is the following week. So that is our video editing program. Character Animator, some of you might like this one. Character Animator is all about, it kind of replaces the old Flash Animator, but I'm going to focus on facial animation and I'm going to show you like seriously, in that 1 hour session, you'll be able to create your own avatar of yourself, which is fully animated without actually doing any animation, which is cool. So that one's there. Then Intro to Photoshop. So if you liked what I was talking about with Photoshop, that's what that one is for. And then after that, we have the start of our masterclass in Autodesk Inventor, and that is for creating stuff. So kind of more into creating three-dimensional objects. So Matt is going to be running that one, and he's going to make a keychain thumb piano, which I have no idea what the heck that is, but I'm going to watch the session, so I want to make one of those. They'll be pre-recorded, so they'll be videos that we will send out to anyone that subscribes so you can watch them, mainly because that's quite a complex unit, and we thought maybe it'd be better to have the video that you can just kind of watch back at your own pace. Introduction to block coding in Scratch, video editing for Mac, laser cutting, again using Lightburn software, which is software that most schools will use, creating a podcast and recording audio in Audacity, which is all free, 3D modeling, and that is, well, that's pretty much the month done. So that is all it. Jump on board to register. You'll get the link straight away so you can watch them live whenever you can jump on board. And you can watch them later. So thank you very much. I'm going to end the stream. Sorry for going through those plugs. I do it every time. And I will see you all tomorrow in my garage, potentially.